They fired me in front of everyone. But what I did next destroyed their entire company. My name is Ava Maddox. And 9 minutes after they fired me in front of the entire company, their entire empire collapsed. They thought I would cry. They thought I'd beg. They thought they could erase 7 years of my life just like that. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. I just looked CEO Brandon Cross right in the eye, slid my ID badge across the polished conference table, and said calmly, "Then you'd better explain to your investors why the entire Nova Grid platform goes offline in exactly 9 minutes." The room froze. Every breath felt like glass. Brandon's smirk faltered just slightly. Someone in the back of the room opened a laptop with trembling fingers. Another sprinted toward the door. HR's mouth fell open. The CTO went pale, and I stood up. Slowly adjusted my blazer, picked up the small cardboard box they'd given me for my belongings, and walked out with a steady pace that said, "I'm not the one in trouble. You are. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by the very people you built something for, if you've ever had your sweat, your genius, your loyalty treated like disposable trash, leave a like and stay with me. Because this story, you're going to want to hear how it ends." But let's rewind just a bit. I wasn't always the woman walking out of Novacore's headquarters with fire in her eyes and revenge in her back pocket. Just 7 years earlier, I had walked into that same building for the first time as a wide-eyed systems engineer with a laptop full of ideas and nothing but ramen in my pantry. Back then, Novacore wasn't even a company. It was a whiteboard, a coffee machine, and a desperate dream pitched by Brandon Cross to anyone who would listen. Everyone else walked away. I stayed. I stayed through the sleepless nights, the 18-hour coding marathons, the missed birthdays and Thanksgivings and anniversaries. I stayed when the servers crashed, when the investors ghosted, when the entire infrastructure nearly fell apart because of one misplaced semicolon in the core logic. And slowly, piece by piece, I built something no one believed we could. Nova Grid, a revolutionary logistics and infrastructure synchronization system. It became the backbone of the company, handling billions of dollars in transactions, coordinating major utility networks, securing government contracts, and powering entire cities. It was my code, my architecture, my protocols, my soul line by line. Brandon used to stand on conference stages with wireless mics and $1,000 suits, calling me the architect of the future. His words, not mine. But the future apparently had an expiration date. About 3 weeks ago, I noticed my access to financial servers had been quietly revoked. My name was missing from the new patent filings. Conversation stopped when I entered the room. The interns avoided eye contact. HR had become disturbingly friendly. That's when I started preparing. What they didn't know, what Brandon never even thought to ask, was that I had embedded a failsafe into Nova Grid years ago. Not malicious, not destructive. Just protective. A heartbeat protocol that scanned for unauthorized administrative changes. And if mine were ever removed, the system would assume it was under hostile control and shut itself off. Not crash, not corrupt, just vanish. Like a fortress sealing itself from the inside, unbreachable. It wasn't sabotage, it was ownership. So when Brandon called me into that strategy meeting and casually announced like a weatherman predicting sunshine, "Ava, we're moving in a new direction. Effective immediately, your services are no longer needed," I didn't panic. I'd already hit the switch. What Brandon didn't understand, what men like him never understand, is that we don't just build systems. We are the system. As I stepped into the elevator, I checked my phone. The countdown showed 5 minutes, 12 seconds remaining. I could already imagine the panic spreading like wildfire across the engineering floor. Red alerts, frozen dashboards, clients calling, investors screaming. Brandon thought he was cutting dead weight. What he really did, he severed the only lifeline he had, If you've ever seen someone mistake your silence for weakness or your grace for compliance, drop a comment and let me know what you did next. Sometimes, the best revenge is showing them what the world looks like without you. The moment I stepped out of that elevator and into the parking garage, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual noise, cars honking, people rushing to their next meeting, completely unaware that the heartbeat of Novacor was about to flatline. My phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls, frantic texts, and emails marked urgent. Most were from unknown numbers, but I recognized a few: Rachel, the company's operations director, and Mark, the CTO, two people who had always shown me respect beneath the corporate mask. I ignored all of them. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew the power I held. They needed me, that much was clear. But I wasn't ready to rush back to fix a mess I didn't create. This wasn't just about a system outage. It was about reclaiming what was mine. I allowed myself a moment of quiet, sipping my coffee at a small cafe nearby, watching strangers pass by without a clue about the chaos unraveling behind the glass walls of Novacor. Back at the office, the situation was catastrophic. Clients scrambled to track shipments, logistics hubs went dark, and investors started asking questions they never wanted to hear. The company's reputation, built painstakingly over years, was crumbling in real time. Yet here I was, the architect of the entire system, calmly observing the fallout. It was poetic justice in motion. 2 days earlier, everything had been so different. Brandon had publicly praised me as the backbone of Novacor, the irreplaceable genius who held the entire operation together. But behind closed doors, the whispers began. Budget cuts targeted my department, meetings excluded me, and new hires arrived with fresh resumes but zero experience. The writing was on the wall, and I wasn't blind to it. It's a strange kind of betrayal when your own company starts to act like a stranger. When loyalty is traded for cheap labor and corporate politics. When the people who promise to protect your vision try to erase you from the story altogether. That's why 6 months ago I started embedding layers of security no one else knew existed. Not just to protect the system, but to protect myself, to make sure that if I was ever removed, Novacor would realize just how much depended on me. I built a fortress inside the code, a silent sentinel that would trigger only if my credentials were revoked. And now that sentinel was awake. If you're watching this and have ever felt invisible, sidelined, or undervalued at work, maybe it's time to ask yourself, what's your failsafe? What have you built that no one else can take away? I promise you, your value isn't in the words they say about you. It's in the impact only you can create. If you've ever been overlooked or replaced, drop a like and share your story below. We all deserve to be seen. Looking back now, it's clear that my journey at Novacor was a roller coaster from the very start. When I first joined, the company was a small startup operating out of a cramped shared office with more ideas than funding. I was fresh out of college, hungry to prove myself, and ready to put in whatever hours it took to build something meaningful. I was the kind of engineer who thrived on challenges, spending late nights debugging code and designing architecture that would one day support millions of transactions across multiple continents. From day one, I knew this was my calling. I crafted every single line of code for NovaGrid, the platform that would eventually revolutionize logistics synchronization. It wasn't just a job, it was a mission. I lived and breathed the product, often sacrificing holidays, birthdays, and sleep. My dedication earned me respect from peers and praise from the CEO, Brandon Cross, who often credited me publicly as the backbone of the company. But as the company grew, the dynamics shifted. With new investors and an expanding executive team, the personal connections faded. The praise was still there, but the trust began to erode. Meetings I once led now excluded me. Financial documents vanished from my view. Rumors swirled about hiring cheaper, younger engineers to replace me. The very platform I had poured my heart into was slowly being stripped of my name. 6 months before my termination, I noticed subtle changes. My access to critical systems was limited and my input on key decisions was ignored. The signs were clear I was being edged out. But instead of reacting with anger or fear, I started preparing. I went back to the codebase and embedded a silent failsafe, a protocol that would protect NovaGrid if I was ever removed. It wasn't sabotage, it was insurance. That protocol would be triggered if my credentials were revoked, automatically shutting down the entire system to prevent unauthorized control. I designed it to protect the integrity of the platform, not to cause harm. I didn't want NovaCore to fall apart. I wanted it to be safe from people who didn't understand what they were dealing with. When the day came that Brandon called me into the conference room to announce my termination, I was ready. I didn't need to yell or plead. I just reminded them calmly, clearly, that without me, NovaGrid would be offline in 9 minutes. I watched the panic spread across the room as the countdown began. If you've ever faced a moment where your work, your dedication, or your identity was being erased, share your experience in the comments. You're not alone. The moment the countdown hit 0, everything inside NovaCore froze. The servers went dark. Client portals became unreachable, and the entire logistics network collapsed like a house of cards. The product I had built from scratch, the very heart of the company, was suddenly lifeless. Emails flooded in from frantic clients, operations managers called in panic, and the investor relations team scrambled to explain the catastrophic failure to shareholders. I was far away from the chaos, sitting comfortably at a coffee shop with no intention of rushing back, at least not yet. Because this was the moment they needed to understand. NovaCore was nothing without me. The system wasn't broken, it was protected. Every line of code, every server, every API endpoint, all meticulously designed to safeguard against anyone who tried to take control without proper authorization. The panic within the company was palpable. I could almost picture Brandon Cross, the CEO, who had dismissed me with a smug grin, just hours before slamming his fist against the polished conference table, his face flushed with frustration and fear. His carefully constructed empire was unraveling, and he had no idea how to stop it. As news of the outage spread, the atmosphere shifted from disbelief to desperation. The COO, Rachel, and CTO, Mark, were the first to reach out to me. They came to my door weary and apologetic, their faces etched with regret and exhaustion. They knew that only I held the key to restoring NovaCore, but I wasn't ready to save them just yet. I sat with them in my living room, listening as they admitted their mistakes and begged for a second chance. But this wasn't just about fixing a system anymore. It was about reclaiming my worth and demanding respect. I laid out my terms clearly: a formal apology, restoration of my title and authority, rightful ownership of my intellectual property, and a significant buyout for the damage they had caused. Brandon, when he finally appeared, was a man unrecognizable from the confident CEO who had fired me. He stormed into my home like a cornered animal, yelling and threatening lawsuits. But I held firm. I showed him the evidence, the failing systems, the breached contracts, the mounting legal liabilities. His threats dissolved under the weight of reality. "Sign," I said, "or watch everything you built burn." If you're watching now and have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, whether at work or in life, take a moment to reflect and then share your story below. Sometimes the strongest power lies in standing your ground. If you're finding strength in this story, please like and let me know. Together we can reclaim our worth. Signing those papers wasn't just a legal formality, it was the moment the entire power dynamic shifted. Suddenly, I was no longer the disgraced engineer who had been unceremoniously tossed aside. I was Ava Maddox, co-owner of NovaCore's most valuable asset, chief technology officer, and a member of the board with full voting rights. The very company that tried to erase me had just handed me the keys to its kingdom. Returning to the office the next day felt surreal. The hallways were quieter than usual. Conversations stopped as I walked by, eyes tracking my every move. The junior developers who had once avoided me now whispered behind their monitors, and even some executives who had looked down on me now approached with hesitant respect. It was a new era, one I was determined to lead with strength and purpose. But I knew the fight wasn't over. During the first board meeting I chaired, I laid out everything the company had been through: the sabotage, the attempted cover-ups, and the costly mistakes made by the previous leadership. I revealed confidential logs proving that Brandon Cross had repeatedly accessed the system without authorization, violating company policy and jeopardizing the very foundation of NovaGrid. The room fell silent. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. One after another, they agreed Brandon had to go. The vote was unanimous. Watching him escorted out by security was a moment I never imagined I'd witness. The man who had tried to break me was finally broken himself. Yet as I was settling into this new role, a darker threat emerged. It wasn't just former executives or disgruntled employees anymore. I received an anonymous call, a calm, cold voice warning that a powerful investment firm, Vanguard Strategic Holdings, was behind the scenes, orchestrating attempts to seize control of NovaGrid. They weren't interested in negotiation. They wanted ownership by any means necessary. I knew I had to act fast. Using the deep security measures I had built into the system, I traced the source of multiple cyber attacks back to shell companies linked to Vanguard. Realizing the stakes were higher than ever, I compiled evidence and leaked it to the FBI, SEC, and major tech publications. Within hours, investigations were launched, and the narrative shifted. NovaGrid wasn't a failing company. It was a target of corporate sabotage. My name was no longer just attached to the product, it was everywhere, synonymous with resilience and justice. The stock price stabilized, investors regained confidence, and the company's future looked brighter than ever. If you're watching and have ever felt underestimated or overlooked, remember this: owning your worth and fighting for it is the greatest victory you can claim. If this story resonates with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Even after reclaiming my rightful place at NovaCore, I quickly realized that rebuilding trust and repairing the damage would be the real test. The system was stable now, but the scars ran deep, not just in the infrastructure, but within the company culture itself. Employees who had once been loyal were now cautious, some even skeptical of the new leadership. Reassuring them, rebuilding morale, and setting a clear direction became my daily mission. I convened frequent town halls and open forums, sharing not just technical updates, but the story behind our struggle. Transparency became our most powerful tool. I wanted every employee, from the newest intern to the longest tenured manager, to understand the value of their work and the importance of standing together. Clients, too, were jittery. Many had suffered operational losses during the outage, and lawsuits were already looming. I personally reached out to our biggest customers, owning up to the crisis and assuring them of our commitment. I delegated legal teams to expedite settlements and revisited contracts to ensure stronger safeguards in the future. Behind the scenes, I worked tirelessly with engineers to fine-tune NovaGrid's defenses. The cyber warfare we faced was intense and relentless, with hackers probing our firewalls in waves. But unlike before, we were ready. I led a task force to develop AI-driven threat detection, constantly evolving our security protocols. One afternoon, as I reviewed the system's activity logs, an alert flashed: a subtle ping from an unfamiliar IP address. It was a reminder that the fight for control was ongoing. But now, we had the upper hand. Rachel, my operations director, stopped by my office. "You're a force to be reckoned with, Ava," she said quietly. "I've never seen anyone turn a company around like this." I smiled, though deep down I knew the battle was far from over. The corporate world was a chessboard, and I had just captured the king. But the game, it continued. In moments like these, I often reflect on what brought me here: perseverance, ownership, and the refusal to be sidelined. It's not just about coding or technology, it's about standing firm in your value no matter the obstacles. If you're watching this from your own battles, Whether in a job relationship or life challenge, remember, your strength is your story. Comment below if you've ever had to fight for your place, and let's support each other. And if this story inspires you, consider subscribing to join this journey of resilience and empowerment. When I first walked back into the NovaCore building as the new CTO and co-owner, I could feel the tension in the air like static electricity. It wasn't just the stunned looks or whispered conversations behind closed doors. It was the knowledge that I had shifted the balance of power in a way no one had anticipated. The same people who had once ignored me now studied my every move, and I intended to make every moment count. My first order of business was to assess the damage from the outage and craft a plan to rebuild trust, both internally and externally. I gathered the engineering leads, the operations managers, and legal teams in what we dubbed the war room, whiteboards filled with charts, monitors flashing recovery statuses, and the low hum of strategic discussions created a war-zone atmosphere. But it was a war I was determined to win. By noon, we had stabilized over 85% of the core systems. APIs were operational, databases restored, and client portals returning online one by one. But beyond the technical fixes, I knew the bigger battle was with perception. Clients weren't just angry about the outage. They were furious about what the outage represented: incompetence, betrayal, and instability at the top. I personally called the executives at Centurion Freight, one of our largest clients, to reassure them directly. I could hear the tension in their voices and the hesitancy beneath their words. "How can we trust NovaCore after this?" they asked. I didn't have a magic fix, but I promised transparency, accountability, and above all, a commitment to never let this happen again. Meanwhile, the legal department was drafting apologies and renegotiated contracts faster than anyone could have imagined. Lawsuits were looming, but I believed that owning our mistakes openly was the first step toward resolution. The public relations team worked tirelessly to manage the narrative, focusing on the company's turnaround and new leadership. Late in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown caller ID. I debated ignoring it, but something told me otherwise. I answered, and a smooth, polished voice introduced himself as Vincent, a representative for a powerful investment group interested in acquiring NovaCore's flagship product. His tone was calm but firm. This wasn't a casual inquiry. It was an ultimatum. I told him firmly, "NovaGrid is not for sale. Not now. Not ever." He paused, then warned me to reconsider, hinting at consequences if I refused. I smiled and replied, "We're not interested in selling out our vision or our integrity." That call was a clear signal the battle for control was far from over. But I was ready. I had faced corporate betrayal, legal threats, and sabotage, and I had come out stronger every time. If you've ever had to face a challenge that seemed bigger than you know this, it's your resilience and clarity of purpose that will guide you through. If this resonates with you, please leave a comment and share your story. Your voice matters. And if you want to follow this journey, consider subscribing. Together, we rise. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. As the new CTO and co-owner of NovaCore, I found myself navigating a complex landscape of technical challenges, legal battles, and internal politics. The cyber attacks didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. Every day brought a new wave of phishing attempts, denial of service floods, and probing scans from unknown sources. It was clear that whoever wanted control of NovaGrid was willing to fight dirty. But I wasn't about to back down. Working closely with my security team, we implemented advanced AI-driven threat detection and response systems. These protocols monitored network traffic in real time, automatically isolating suspicious activity before it could cause harm. I personally reviewed every anomaly, making sure no attack went unnoticed. Our defenses became a digital fortress, and with each thwarted attempt, our confidence grew. However, the threats weren't just digital. Behind the scenes, Vanguard Strategic Holdings, the investment firm I'd uncovered, began applying pressure in other ways. They used legal maneuvers to stall contracts, whispered doubts to shareholders, and attempted to recruit insiders to their cause. It was a high-stakes game of corporate chess, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. One evening, I received an encrypted message: "Check your back door." It was chilling, a clear warning that they had discovered the hidden security measures I'd put in place years ago. I immediately launched a full audit, tracing every access point and confirmed that someone was attempting to exploit the backdoor. This wasn't just a threat, it was an invasion. I convened an emergency meeting with Rachel and Mark. We debated the risks and benefits of initiating a full system lockdown, a drastic measure that would temporarily cut off all access to NovaGrid, even for legitimate users. It was a painful decision, but necessary to prevent total compromise. With a steady hand, I initiated the lockdown protocol. The system sealed itself shut like a vault, blocking every entry point. The attack ceased momentarily, but the silence was tense, like a calm before a storm. And storm it was. Within hours, we faced coordinated cyber warfare unlike anything I'd seen. Floods of data packets designed to overwhelm sophisticated credential stuffing attacks, and targeted exploits aimed at our core infrastructure. But this was our moment to fight back. Leveraging deep trace analytics and AI pattern recognition, we traced the attacks back to a private cloud server in Zurich, linked to shell corporations owned by Vanguard. It was the smoking gun. I sent compiled evidence of the sabotage to the FBI's cybercrime division, the SEC, and major technology media outlets. The public exposure was swift and devastating for our adversaries. The news headlines erupted overnight: massive cyber takeover attempt foiled at NovaCore investment giant, under investigation for corporate sabotage. Tech innovator Ava Maddox saves the day. From the ashes of betrayal and sabotage, a new narrative was born, one where integrity, courage, and relentless dedication prevailed. If you've ever faced unseen enemies or felt under siege in your life or work, remember this story. Share it, comment below, and let's build a community of resilience together. The morning after the headlines broke, the atmosphere at NovaCore had completely transformed. Instead of fear and uncertainty, there was a renewed sense of hope and determination. Our clients began reaching out, not with anger or threats, but with cautious optimism. Investors who had once doubted us now showed renewed confidence. It was clear that the battle we had fought was not just about technology, but about trust and integrity. I spent that day meeting with the leadership team to outline our path forward. We needed to rebuild the company's reputation from the ground up, and that meant not only fixing the technical issues, but also changing the culture that had allowed betrayal and sabotage to take root. I emphasized transparency, accountability, and collaboration as our core values moving forward. But rebuilding trust with clients and employees was just one part of the challenge. There were still legal battles looming over the company, with several clients threatening to sue for the disruption caused by the system outage. Our legal team worked tirelessly to negotiate settlements and communicate openly with all stakeholders. I personally took on the responsibility of speaking to key clients, explaining what had happened, and assuring them that we were taking every step necessary to prevent a repeat. Despite the pressure, I felt a deep sense of purpose. Every challenge we faced was an opportunity to prove that NovaCore was stronger than the sum of its parts. And as I walked through the office that evening, watching engineers collaborate late into the night to polish the system and squash lingering bugs, I felt a renewed pride in what we had built. But the fight wasn't over. Late that evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown caller ID. I hesitated but answered. A calm, polished voice introduced himself as Vincent, a representative from a powerful investment firm interested in acquiring NovaCore's flagship technology. His tone was cordial but firm. This was no ordinary business offer. It was an ultimatum. I was clear with him: NovaGrid was not for sale. Not now, not ever. The vision behind it belonged to the people who built and protected it, not those who sought to control it through intimidation and leverage. Vincent paused, then warned me to reconsider. I smiled undeterred and told him we were committed to our path and to our people. The call was a stark reminder that our victory was only temporary and that the real war for control was still ongoing. But I was ready. I had weathered betrayal, legal threats, and cyber warfare, and I was prepared to fight for what was mine. If you've ever faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, remember that resilience and clarity of purpose can guide you through even the darkest storms. If this story speaks to you, please share your experience in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if you want to follow this journey, consider subscribing. Together we rise. As the weeks unfolded, the true magnitude of what we had survived became clear. The attempted hostile takeover by Vanguard Strategic Holdings was not a simple corporate maneuver. It was an orchestrated campaign of sabotage designed to cripple Novacor and force us into submission. They wielded money, influence, and technology in an effort to wrest control of Novagrid, but what they underestimated was the will of the people who built it. Our security team, bolstered by cutting-edge AI and relentless vigilance, continued to monitor and counteract the sophisticated cyber threats. Every day brought new waves of attacks, probing for weaknesses, attempting to exploit any gap they could find. But Novagrid's defenses, layered with years of expertise, and the fail-safes I personally embedded, held firm. Behind the scenes, the legal battles intensified. Our attorneys worked tirelessly to expose the shell companies and fraudulent activities linked to Vanguard. We partnered closely with federal agencies, providing comprehensive evidence of the sabotage and coercion attempts. The investigation sent shockwaves through the investment community, leading to regulatory scrutiny and public outcry. Internally, I focused on strengthening the company's culture. I instituted new policies promoting transparency and ethical leadership. Town halls, open-door meetings, and anonymous feedback channels became the norm. Employees who had once felt disillusioned now found a renewed sense of purpose and trust in the company's direction. The financial landscape began to stabilize. Our stock price rebounded, fueled by the growing confidence of investors who saw not just a resilient product, but a company with unshakable integrity. Contracts that once seemed at risk were renegotiated or renewed, and new partnerships emerged, drawn by Novacor's unwavering commitment to innovation and security. One evening, as I sat reviewing system logs, Rachel approached me quietly. "You've changed the narrative," she said. "Novacor is no longer just a company, it's a symbol of resistance and resilience." Her words resonated deeply. Our journey wasn't just about technology, it was about standing firm in the face of adversity and claiming our rightful place. If you're watching this and ever felt overwhelmed by forces beyond your control, remember this: true strength is in how you rise after being pushed down. Share your story below and let's inspire each other to keep fighting. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and join this community where we turn setbacks into comebacks. The boardroom was filled with a tension that could be sliced with a knife. It was my first official meeting as a voting member, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation and a bit of fear. The executives and shareholders were still coming to terms with the dramatic changes that had swept through Novacor over the past weeks. Some sat with arms crossed, others fidgeted nervously, but all eyes were on me. I began by laying out a comprehensive internal threat audit report. On the large screen behind me, the logs of unauthorized file accesses, midnight login attempts, and suspicious IP addresses painted a damning picture. The evidence was irrefutable. Brandon Cross, the former CEO, had not only attempted to sabotage our core product, but had done so repeatedly. There were gasps and murmurs. I held the room's attention as I walked them through the timeline of events, showing how his actions had endangered client contracts, investor confidence, and the very reputation of Novacor. When I paused, waiting for reactions, I could feel the weight of the moment settling in. One board member, an older gentleman named Whitaker, cleared his throat and addressed the group. Given this evidence and the threat posed, the board must take immediate action. I didn't have to say more. The vote was unanimous. Brandon Cross was formally removed as CEO effective immediately. The security team escorted him from the building, a final chapter closing on a man who had underestimated the very woman he tried to destroy. But the victory was bittersweet. I knew that removing one person wouldn't fix the deeper issues that allowed this betrayal to happen. It was time to rebuild not just the system, but the culture, the trust, and the vision that Novacor had lost. In the days that followed, I set new standards for leadership accountability and transparency. I encouraged open communication and empowered employees at every level to speak up. Together, we began reshaping Novacor into a company that valued its people as much as its technology. Standing in that boardroom, I realized that true leadership isn't about control, it's about responsibility. And the responsibility to protect not just a company, but the people who make it what it is. If you're watching and have experienced betrayal or injustice in your career, know that you're not alone. Share your story below, and let's support each other in rising stronger. If this message resonates, subscribe and join us on this journey of courage and transformation. Even as the dust settled from Brandon's removal, new challenges emerged. Vanguard Strategic Holdings, the investment firm behind much of the previous sabotage, was not willing to concede defeat quietly. Their representatives intensified their pressure, using every legal and financial tool at their disposal to undermine Novacor's recovery. Lawsuits multiplied, shareholder meetings grew heated, and rumors swirled about hostile takeovers. But by now, I was no longer the isolated engineer who could be pushed around. I stood firmly at the helm, guiding Novacor through these turbulent waters. Working alongside Rachel and Mark, we crafted a strategic response that combined legal resilience, technical innovation, and transparent communication. We prepared detailed reports exposing Vanguard's tactics, which we shared with regulators and the media. At the same time, inside the company, morale was rising. Employees who had once been disheartened now found purpose in defending the integrity of the product and the vision we had fought so hard to protect. Cross-departmental teams collaborated like never before, and new initiatives focused on cultivating a culture of trust and empowerment. On a personal level, the pressure was intense. I spent long nights poring over contracts, attending meetings, and coordinating with law enforcement agencies. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but I was fueled by the knowledge that every step forward was a victory for everyone who had believed in Novacor's mission. One particularly difficult afternoon, as I reviewed system security logs, an alert flashed, a minor breach attempt traced back to an unfamiliar IP. It was a stark reminder that threats still lurked in the shadows. I convened my security team, immediately reinforcing protocols and initiating a comprehensive audit. Despite the constant challenges, I took moments to reflect on how far we'd come. From being fired in public humiliation to leading the company's resurgence, the journey had been transformative. It taught me that leadership isn't about avoiding hardship, but embracing it and turning it into strength. If you're watching and facing ongoing battles in your life or work, remember this: persistence and integrity can turn the tide. Share your experience in the comments to inspire others. And if you're committed to growth and resilience, subscribe and be part of this community where challenges become stepping stones. Months into my leadership, Novacor was no longer the fragile startup I had joined years ago. It had evolved into a fortress of innovation, resilience, and integrity. The scars from the sabotage remained, but they served as reminders of how far we had come and the lessons learned along the way. One of the proudest moments came during a quarterly town hall when I stood before the entire company, from engineers to administrative staff, and shared not just our successes, but the raw truth about the battles we had faced. I spoke openly about betrayal, about the attempt to erase me, and about how we had reclaimed our destiny together. The response was overwhelming. Employees shared their own stories of struggle and perseverance. The sense of unity was palpable. It was clear that NovaCore was no longer just a workplace, it was a family bound by shared purpose and mutual respect. But my journey wasn't just about corporate victories. It was a personal evolution too. I learned that true power lies in knowing your worth and refusing to be diminished by those who seek to control you. I embraced my role not only as a leader, but as a mentor helping others find their voice and stand firm in their values. Outside the walls of NovaCore, the repercussions of our fight rippled through the tech industry. Regulators tightened oversight on corporate governance, and stories of our struggle inspired other innovators facing similar challenges. I received messages from countless professionals who saw their own battles reflected in my story, and that connection fueled my commitment to lead with transparency and courage. In the quiet moments, I often reflect on the path that brought me here, the late nights coding the moments of doubt, the betrayal, and ultimately, the triumph. It's a journey that reminds me every day that while technology can be built by anyone, true innovation requires heart resilience and unwavering self-belief. If you've ever faced moments that tested your courage or questioned your worth, please share your experience below. Your story matters and can light the way for someone else. And if you believe in the power of resilience and leadership, subscribe and join our growing community committed to turning setbacks into comebacks. Despite the progress, challenges still lurked in the shadows. Vanguard Strategic Holdings, though publicly weakened, continued to pull strings behind the scenes. Their attempts at undermining NovaCore shifted to subtler forms, whispers of dissent among shareholders, anonymous leaks to the press, and strategic partnerships designed to isolate us in the industry. I realized that true victory wasn't just about fighting the visible battles, but anticipating and countering the unseen ones. To that end, I focused on building alliances, partnering with companies and leaders who valued integrity and innovation over short-term gains. We expanded our ecosystem, integrating NovaGrid with emerging technologies and broadening our impact in the supply chain and infrastructure sectors. Internally, I continued to push for a culture where every voice mattered. I established mentorship programs, leadership workshops, and open forums, fostering a space where ideas could flourish without fear. It was important that NovaCore never reverted to the toxic environment that had allowed betrayal to take root. Technology-wise, we doubled down on security and innovation. Our R&D teams explored AI-driven predictive analytics, blockchain integration for transparent transactions, and advanced cybersecurity protocols. We weren't just recovering, we were building the future. At the same time, I kept a vigilant eye on the external threats. The encrypted messages, the anonymous calls, they reminded me that vigilance was a constant necessity. But with every challenge, we grew stronger, more united. One evening, as I reviewed the company's growth metrics, I received an unexpected message, a simple note of thanks from a former competitor who had been inspired by our journey. It was a reminder that the true power of leadership lies not just in survival, but in inspiring others to rise. If you've ever had to rebuild from the ashes, share how you found strength in the comments. Your experience could be the beacon someone else needs. And if you're committed to leading with courage and vision, subscribe and grow with us. As the seasons changed, so did NovaCore. What began as a fight for survival transformed into a movement toward redefining what it means to be a leader, an innovator, and a community. I stood not just as a survivor, but as a trailblazer committed to building something lasting and meaningful. One of the most profound lessons I learned through this journey was about ownership, not just of technology or patents, but of our stories, our voices, and our futures. Ownership means taking responsibility, standing up for what you believe in, and refusing to be silenced or sidelined. This mindset permeated every decision I made, every policy I implemented, and every interaction with the people who made NovaCore what it was. I pushed for initiatives that prioritized employee well-being innovation with ethics and business strategies that valued long-term impact over quick profits. The company's reputation rebounded spectacularly. Industry awards, media features, and invitations to speak at conferences followed not because of the crisis we endured, but because of how we transformed it into a catalyst for change. Personally, I found fulfillment not just in the victories, but in mentoring the next generation of engineers and leaders. I often thought back to the young woman I was when she first walked through Novacore's doors full of hope and determination. I wanted to make sure others had the support and guidance to thrive without facing the betrayals I endured. Through every challenge, I held onto one unwavering truth: freedom is earned through courage, and respect is commanded by standing firm in your values. The road wasn't easy, and the scars remain, but the journey made me who I am. If you're watching this and believe in owning your story, standing tall in adversity, and building a future on your terms, share your thoughts below. Let's inspire each other. And if you're ready to join a community of resilient leaders and changemakers, subscribe and be part of this incredible journey. Closing. This story is a testament to the power of resilience, integrity, and courage in the face of betrayal and adversity. It shows that true ownership goes beyond titles and patents. It's about claiming your voice, your worth, and your future. No matter what battles you face, remember that your strength lies in standing firm, speaking out, and never letting anyone define your value for you. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to sharing more stories of courage and transformation with you. As I close this chapter of our story, I want to leave you with a message that has become my guiding light through every challenge. True strength isn't measured by the battles we win, but by the courage we summon to face them. When the world tries to erase you, doubt your worth, or silence your voice, it's the resolve within you that will rewrite the narrative. This journey has taught me that ownership is more than holding a title or a stake in a company. It's about owning your story, embracing your truth, and standing unapologetically in your power. It's about recognizing that even in the darkest moments, there is a spark within you capable of igniting change. I want you to remember that no one has the right to define your value except you. When betrayal, injustice, or doubt comes knocking, meet it with resilience and clarity. Protect what you've built, whether it's a career, a dream, or your identity, and never let fear dictate your path. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside. It's a call to rise, to claim your space, and to lead with integrity. Your voice matters, your contributions matter, and your future is yours to shape. Thank you for being here, for sharing this journey, and for believing in the power of resilience. If this story has touched you, I encourage you to share it, to speak your truth, and to stand strong. Together, we create a community where courage fuels progress, and every setback is a setup for a greater comeback. Remember, your story is your power. Own it.